I felt my heart break in a way I never imagined. Lauren's words cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had. I tried to explain that I couldn't afford the wedding she dreamed of, that I loved her and wanted to be there in every way I could, but money was something I simply didn't have. She didn't want to hear it. Her eyes were cold, her voice sharp, and in that moment, I realized she had made her choice. I left that day feeling smaller than I ever had. I watched her walk away, planning a life that didn't need me, and a part of me wanted to scream, to beg, to somehow make her understand. But I stayed quiet. I couldn't force love or respect where it no longer existed. The house grew silent. The phone stayed still. The holidays came and went without a single call from her. Friends and family started to pick sides quietly, and I found myself sitting alone, thinking about every sacrifice I had made, every bedtime story I had read, every scraped knee I had kissed. And still, it wasn't enough. It hurt in a way I never thought possible. I realized then that this was more than a wedding or money. This was a test of my worth in the eyes of my own daughter. And the answer she gave me was loud and clear: I wasn't enough. A few days later, Lauren called again. This time, her voice was sharper, colder. She gave me an impossible choice: fund the entire wedding exactly the way she wanted, or be completely cut out of her life. There was no room for discussion, no understanding, just demands. I tried to explain calmly that my savings were meant for my retirement and medical emergencies. I couldn't risk my future just to meet her expectations. I told her I loved her and wanted to support her in every way I could, but money wasn't something I could give freely without consequences. Instead of listening, she shouted at me, accusing me of choosing money over my own daughter. Her words hit harder than I expected. She made it sound as if my love had a price tag, and because I couldn't pay it, I wasn't worthy of her. By the end of the call, her voice had grown icy and final. "I don't need a mother like you," she said, and then she hung up. Sitting there in silence, I realized something painful but important. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. Lauren wanted to control me, to dictate my choices, and punish me when I refused. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and clarity. She wasn't asking for help, she was trying to dominate me. And at that moment, I understood that love wasn't part of this conversation anymore. The weeks passed, and still no wedding invitation arrived. I hoped it was a mistake, that Lauren would call and explain, but the silence was deafening. Instead, I started hearing things through relatives, whispers that Lauren had told everyone I had abandoned her, that I didn't care enough to be there. It hurt more than words could describe. Slowly, even extended family began to distance themselves. Calls became rare, visits stopped, and I felt like I was disappearing from the world I had built for my daughter. When the wedding day finally came, I stayed home. I cooked a quiet dinner for one, the smell of food filling the empty house. Every sound felt louder in the silence. I glanced around at the rooms filled with memories, Lauren's childhood drawings, her first bike, the tiny shoes she had worn as a toddler, and I felt the weight of loss crushing me. I found an old framed photo of her as a little girl, smiling up at me with trust and love. I held it in my hands and finally let the tears fall. I sobbed for the daughter who no longer wanted me in her life, for the family I was losing, and for the love that had become so conditional. It was my lowest moment. I felt invisible, betrayed, and heartbroken all at once. Yet in that sadness, a quiet thought began to grow: perhaps this pain could one day teach me strength. Months went by, and still, nothing. No calls, no messages, not even a holiday greeting. Every attempt I made to reach out was ignored. At first, I kept hoping Lauren would change her mind, that she would remember the love we shared. But each unanswered call and unread message made it clear, she had made her choice, and I could no longer depend on her. Slowly, I stopped trying. I realized that chasing her would only leave me more hurt. Instead, I turned inward. I started seeing a therapist, someone I could talk to without judgment. It helped me sort through the anger, the sadness, and the sense of betrayal. Little by little, I began to understand that my life and my peace mattered too. I also took practical steps to protect myself. I updated my will, my medical directives, and my beneficiaries. It wasn't about revenge or planning anything against her, it was about ensuring my life and security were in my hands, not at the mercy of someone who had already pushed me away. For the first time in a long while, I focused on myself. I found small joys in simple routines, rediscovered hobbies I had set aside, and started rebuilding my sense of self-worth. It was quiet, slow, and often painful, but it was mine. I realized that sometimes self-protection is the first step toward true healing. After months of quiet reflection, I decided it was time to make real changes in my life. I sold the large family home I had lived in for decades and moved into a smaller, cozier place. It wasn't just about space, it was about leaving behind the weight of memories tied to someone who had chosen to push me away. With the money from the sale, I paid off lingering debts and made sure my future was secure. No more uncertainty, no more fear of emergencies. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of relief and control over my own life. I also returned to work, but in a way that suited me. Using skills from my old career, I started part-time consulting. It gave me purpose, independence, and a chance to engage with the world again. Each project I completed reminded me that I was capable, respected, and valuable, even without Lauren's approval. The most freeing part was the change inside me. I no longer felt guilt for standing up for myself. I stopped explaining my choices to anyone, no longer defending decisions that should have been understood without justification. I finally felt peace, a calm, steady feeling that had been missing for years. Choosing myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. And in that choice, I discovered a strength I didn't know I had, a quiet confidence that no one could take away, not even my own daughter. Months passed, and the reality of Lauren's choices began to hit her hard. The lavish wedding she had demanded had left her with enormous debt. Bills piled up, credit cards maxed out, and every month felt like a battle just to keep up. The financial strain started taking a toll on her marriage. Her husband, once patient and loving, began to withdraw. Arguments became common, and the warmth between them seemed to disappear. Lauren started to feel the loneliness she had pushed me into. She remembered all the times I had stayed up late helping her, guiding her through problems, supporting her dreams. Suddenly, it became clear that the one person who had always been there for her was now gone. But pride kept her silent. She didn't want to admit her mistakes, didn't want to show weakness to her husband or to anyone else. She tried to handle everything on her own, but every failure reminded her of the mother she had turned away. Slowly, the weight of her decisions began to settle on her shoulders. For the first time, she realized that love and support could not be replaced by money, luxury, or control. She had thought cutting me out would make her stronger, but instead, it left a void she couldn't fill. And though she understood her mistake, Lauren was not ready to reach out, at least, not yet. Nearly 2 years after that painful day, my phone rang late at night. The caller ID showed Lauren's name. My heart skipped a beat, but I answered calmly, unsure of what I would hear. Her voice was trembling, and I could hear tears in every word. She sounded small, defeated, and broken in a way I had never heard before. Bills were overdue, her marriage was crumbling, and she didn't know how to fix anything. Between sobs, she whispered, "Mom, I need you." For a moment, I just listened. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture. I didn't ask why she had ignored me all these months. I stayed quiet and let her speak, letting her pour out all the pain and regret she had been holding in. Finally, when the words slowed, I asked her one simple, quiet question: "Do you need me, or my money?" The line went silent for a few seconds. I could feel her hesitation, her shame, and the weight of the truth settling in. She hadn't considered what real love meant. She hadn't realized that taking and demanding was very different from giving and appreciating. That question changed the tone of the call. It made her reflect, made her face her own mistakes, and reminded me that boundaries and self-respect were more important than bending again for someone who had once pushed me away. I realized then, she had come back needing something, but it was up to her to understand what that truly meant. A few days after that late-night call, Lauren showed up at my door. She looked exhausted, worn down by months of struggling, and asked if she could move in just temporarily until she got back on her feet. I could see the desperation in her eyes, but I knew I had to be firm. I told her gently but clearly that she couldn't move in. This wasn't cruelty, I wasn't punishing her, but I couldn't allow myself to be drawn back into a situation where she had once ignored me, treated me like I didn't matter, and demanded everything from me. My boundaries had to stay intact. Instead, I offered her support in ways I could give safely. I gave advice, pointed her toward resources that could help her with bills, and promised to listen when she needed someone to talk to. But I did not give her money, and I did not let her control me again. She was angry. She called me cold, accusing me of being heartless. I stayed calm and said the words I had held on to for years: "You disowned me." I didn't disappear, you chose that. For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she finally seemed to understand, though pride and frustration still lingered. She was facing the consequences of her choices, and I was standing my ground, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. For the first time in a long time, the balance had shifted. I wasn't the one begging for love, I was the one setting the terms. For the first time, Lauren had to face the consequences of her choices alone. Without my support, without anyone to bail her out, she felt the full weight of what she had done. Her marriage, already fragile, fell apart completely. She moved out, leaving behind the life she had once thought she could control. She began to rebuild slowly, working extra hours, cutting back on unnecessary expenses, and downsizing her lifestyle. Every day was a reminder of the decisions she had made, the way she had treated me, the way she had demanded things without gratitude, and the way she had believed entitlement could replace love. Over time, the lessons sank in. She started to understand the cost of pride and selfishness, the emptiness that comes from cutting off the people who truly care. She realized that money could never replace emotional support, guidance, or unconditional love. Months later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was handwritten, careful, and honest. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't try to justify her past or demand anything from me. She simply said she was sorry. Reading it, I felt a quiet mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a sense of closure. She had learned her lesson the hard way, and for the first time, she was taking responsibility for her actions without trying to manipulate the outcome. It wasn't about reconciliation yet. It was about understanding, reflection, and the first real step toward making amends. A few weeks after receiving her apology, Lauren and I agreed to meet for coffee. I was calm, neutral, and careful with my emotions. I wanted to listen, but I wasn't going to let the past sweep me off my feet or make me forget the boundaries I had fought so hard to set. She apologized sincerely, looking me in the eye, and I could see the regret she had carried for months. I accepted her apology, but I knew that things couldn't go back to how they were. Trust had been broken, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. We talked cautiously, sharing small updates about our lives. I offered guidance and support, but I made it clear that I wouldn't be pulled into old patterns of control or demand. Slowly, the relationship began to resume, but it was different, healthier, grounded, and defined by clear limits. As I walked home that day, I reflected on everything that had happened. I realized that I hadn't taken revenge in the way people usually imagine. I hadn't punished her or plotted against her. Instead, I had survived, healed, and refused to be used. That was my victory. Returning to my quiet home, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I had rebuilt my life, my confidence, and my independence. And while Lauren was now a part of it again, it was on my terms, proof that boundaries and self-respect can be stronger than anger or resentment.